I think one of the great pleasures of writing a journey is that you get to go a lot of different places and you get to explore a lot of different kinds of people and the way in which people make their way in the world. I think it is the reason that the picaresque novel is so appealing to novelists. I think it's the reason you write Huck Finn, it's the reason you write Tom Sawyer, it's the reason Ed Doctorow wrote March, because you want to explore more than one world in the same way that when you write what people often call the domestic novel, it's, you know, an interior after an interior after an interior. It's a different kind of journey. This is one. For me, what I most wanted to do was to write a 19th century novel in a 21st century manner so that I could go both outside, like all the other picaresque novels, and see all these people and engage in all these activities, and also go inside the interior life of the characters. Well, I live near Yale, which has a big library, and I live in a very small town, which also has a very good library. But one of the first books I did read was the Cassandra Pybus book, which turns out, of course, not really to be about a woman who walked to Russia because she didn't exist, but much more about this particular Australian journalist's journey to find her, which was very interesting and reassuring only insofar as it made it clear to me that there was no real person and I didn't have to worry about any of the facts pertaining to her life because she didn't exist. And mostly I would work out the outline for the novel, and then when I came across something, when I came to a block or a question, then I would do the research so that I could get the answer to the question. But the point was not to fill the novel with historical detail. I mean, the fact is the 1920s are not the 1400s. People didn't think differently. They didn't essentially dress differently. It was a very modern world. And so the point was not to accumulate a bunch of facts and then sort of decorate the novel with them. Well, I don't know who the judges are going to be about whether or not it qualifies for the American immigrant tale. You know, we're a big country, and people come to our country from the East and from the West, and they are still coming. And do I think that her story is exactly like, you know, a cab driver from Nepal, or the guy who runs the little shop who's from Bangladesh? I think some immigrants, some aspects of the immigrant story are always similar. There is always loss, there is always travel, there are always things that people don't mention, and some aspects are particular to particular cultures. But I think in this particular book, although I did enjoy writing about her arrival in America, it is her attempt to leave that makes up the greater part of the story, I think, and that's because I was equally interested, in fact, more interested in how hard we work to get someplace, only to find it is not where we wanted to be. I love Lillian, and the fact is that I don't have a great deal of affection for people who pour out their souls on television and talk about how victimized they are and how sad they are and how they hope that somebody will give them $50,000 for their suffering. So I like Lillian's style. I'm not much of a hand-wringer myself, and I think that had she lain down by the side of the road to weep over Sophie, she never would have gotten up again. And I wanted a character who endured and was not harsh, was not a terrible person, but was not heroic. She was not a better than average person. She just persevered. I'm not sure that writers ever know how they invent a style or a narrative voice. I heard Lillian's voice, and I could hear the voice of the omniscient narrator. And one of the great pleasures, again, in creating a modern 19th century novel is this omniscient narrator who knows and sees everything, who is not only God, but for me, God with a personality. That this is a narrator who can compare Gumdrop to Lenin and compare, Yakov Schimmelman, who is a tailor, to Coco Chanel, because it's an omniscient narrator that knows everything and also has some of my own prejudices and predilections, which is handy. But I think you recognize the style after you've created it, not while you're doing it. I think if it happens while you're doing it, there is a self-consciousness and you can see the seams as a reader. I always feel that, John Gardner had this great idea that the novel was a dream that you create, and your job is to make sure that nothing interferes with the reader's enjoyment of the dream. And the style is part of that. I am. I am finishing a collection of short stories, which I'll turn in around Christmas time, and I've started on a new novel. But I found that I was having so much traveling with a way that I couldn't really get into the next novel in depth. So I'll begin that in earnest in January.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.